Also, let's talk about what the report issued a few days ago, actually last Friday by PwC Nigeria, about 900 billion US dollars, what they call debt capital, on dragging Nigeria down because within our real estate and agricultural real estate, high value estate, we have a lot of money tied down there. So how do we unlock these potentials and utilize it? How do we break out of this, what are called resurrecting debt capital? Andrew Nevin, who is the chief economist and partner at PwC Nigeria, was said he should be here, but he's locked in the Lagos vehicular traffic. Another tanker accident this morning blocking exit from Lagos and all the way on the highway to get into our headquarters studios here. This is what we suffer sometimes being here. Andrew, we got to do this by phone.
Good morning, both, and I know, but we're all resilient in Nigeria, so it makes you the best we can.
We're very resilient, and we got some coffee prepared for you, thinking you're going to make it earlier, but unfortunately, you have to turn back to the office and go have another cup of coffee there, so we understand that. Thank you so much for sticking with us on the phone to have this conversation while you're there. So let's start from the situation that we have with what you call traffic jam in Lagos. You work around Lekki, that's where PwC Nigeria is located by the seaside. But again, I'm sure as you look out of your office up there, you can see this very daily vehicular traffic. What does it bring to your mind about Nigeria?
Well, I mean, those of us who live in Lagos are used to it, sadly. But I mean, the incredible kind of waste of human capacity. I know in our office, so tired people to come in long distances and then work long hours and try to get home. Everyone has to find a way of coping with it. But you know, there's tremendous loss of efficiency. And of course, we've been on Twitter this morning about this. PwC has written an article, a paper around dead capital. You need to write it about the dead time that we have because of our traffic issues in Lagos.
Yes, it is. There's a lot of money, man hours, which we lost every day just trying to move from one part of the city to the other. Even within the Victoria Island, Lagos Island Central Business District could be very, very, very naughty sometimes. But let's talk about this report. What's it in summary by PwC?
Well, I think the critical point here is that the most important asset, aside from people, but a kind of hard asset, is always land. And the economy is not going to move unless land is developed and value added to it. But that's not going to happen unless people know who owns the land. So our number one message for the country is how do we unlock the value of real estate so people start investing in real estate. They know that they own it. They can get a mortgage. They can then take the mortgage and do other things with it, either invest in that land or start another business. But if we don't solve the land issue, there's nothing else in our economic policy that can compensate for it. So real estate's the biggest asset, as I said. It's also, I mean, we've had the central bank governor come out and say he wants 10% growth. We've had the president come out and say he wants to lift 100 million people out of poverty. None of that can happen unless the real estate sector works. And the real estate sector does not work unless there's a much clearer title and a system for being able to buy and sell and lend against real estate.
The report says this debt capital sitting where you have residential and agricultural real estate. Based on your survey, where are these assets basically in Nigeria? Where are they located?
Well, obviously Lagos is the biggest city and has the highest value for real estate. So a big portion of that, excuse me, is in Lagos. But every city has valuable real estate. If there's not clear title, if there's not a clear market for doing that. In terms of the agricultural land, I mean, we could say we had a lot of land, but again, you still have an issue around are farmers going to be able to invest in their land to be able to upgrade it. So to take one example, if with global warming, Nigeria has enough water, but it's going to have to move more to a system of irrigation than rain-fed, more controlled use of the water. But the only way you're going to invest in irrigation equipment is if you know you have clear title to the land, and of course you need financing for it. So then you need to borrow against the land, and then the financiers or the banks are only going to lend if you have clear title. So it all starts with that. And just to give an example, so I mean, I know we always talk about Rwanda, but this is one area where Rwanda has done really an incredible job. But they started in 2008. By 2013, they've made a lot of progress. They've mapped every piece of property. I think 11 million pieces of property in the country. It's all digital. It's all online and searchable. It's linked into the financial system. It's linked into the judicial system. And what's happened is it's just really unlocked investment. And of course, one of the other things that's happened with this is it turns out it's really benefited women, because when they get clear title to the land and then the inheritance laws, et cetera, then it really helps them economically empowered. So I think we could take the Rwanda example and say, you know, we need to start down that path here.
Yes, when we look at the ranking, Nigeria is not doing well at all when it comes to ease of obtaining a construction permit or registering a property. The numbers look very, very disappointing. So how do we resurrect these nearly $1 trillion debt capital in our real estate business, whether they are residential or agricultural real estate? Where do you think phase one, phase two, phase three, what steps do you think the government needs to take?
Well, I think to begin with, I mean, there has been movement. The central bank governor is talking about the mortgage markets, that he would recognize you need clear titling. So then you also need some reform of the Land Use Act to bring clarity to it. And then at the state level, when we can't invest an arbitrary power in the state governor. No one is going to invest in their property if they're unsure if the property cannot be sold or repurposed. So I think we need the changes to the Land Use Act, but we also need, I think, some education of the governors of how critical this is. I mean, lots of governors are now switched on economically, recognize they have a role to deal with the state. So I think the Governors Forum may be a place where we're sort of trying to give this message to the governors. But in terms of the federal government, I mean, I think this is sort of sunk in. I mean, certainly, as I said, the central bank is making the right signals about this, but it has to be a combination of the federal government and the state government. The other issue is, I mean, we put in the paper, and we've said this before, there's no reason we shouldn't immediately move to a blockchain-type system. The blockchain distributed ledger technology is perfect for land use. This is the best use case for it, because then it's very clear who owns the land, it's very clear who's lent against the land, it's very clear what the value is when the surveyor does the valuation, it's very clear when the land title is transferred from someone to someone else. Of course, Rwanda hasn't put theirs in the blockchain because they started before we really knew about blockchain technology. But there's no reason that Nigeria, the state-by-state level, shouldn't be just embracing this technology.
Yeah, but to start with, Andrew, do we have reliable and adequate data about entire mapping of the country, like what's the size, who owns what was the exact meters, whatever we have of land across the country, what part of this is agricultural, residential? Do you think we have this geographical view database somewhere that will even help us to begin to work on some of these suggestions?
Well, I mean, the obvious answer to that is we don't have a sufficient view. But I mean, certainly the Lagos state government under Governor Ambode made a lot of progress in trying to digitize the records. I mean, we really don't have any choice, right? I mean, as the Chinese say, the best time to plant a tree is 30 years ago, but the second best time is today. I mean, the fact that if the land system is not reformed and clarified in the way that we describe in the paper, then we cannot achieve the economic growth we need. We can't lift people out of poverty. So there's effectively no choice. So to the extent that we don't have the digitization, we need to start it today. But I also think, and people might say we can't afford to do this, but I also think this is the type of project where it's perfect to get the kind of World Bank assistance. There's lots of things that don't work, but this sort of thing, I think, we'll find we do get resources that can do it, because everyone recognizes how critical the land issue is on that. So I don't think we have a choice. As I said, if we don't do this, we are basically guaranteeing that we continue to get poorer and poorer, because nothing else can drive economic growth like reform of the land system and clarity around land usage and land ownership.
The executive summary of the report says there are other forms of debt capital in Nigeria outside the real estate, whether agricultural or residential. Where are these debt monies or this debt capital?
Well, so let's give an example. So, and again, blockchain plays a role in this, but you might have seen last year, InterSwitch announced a system to be able to lend against advanced payment guarantees from major companies like Dangote Cement. So what was happening before was that it was very difficult for the small and medium enterprise was supplying Dangote. Dangote would pay eventually, but the small and medium enterprise couldn't get financing for it because the advanced payment guarantee was written on a piece of paper, and the banks weren't sure whether it was genuine or being used with another bank. So, but now by putting in this, so that's essentially debt capital. You have an asset, which is a receivable from Dangote Cement, but you're not able to finance against it. So you're not able to grow your business, and in some cases you go out of business before you got paid. We're all aware of that here. That case, you can turn that asset into a live debt asset into a live asset by, in this case, with InterSwitch, with the blockchain system. So now what's happening in the entire value chain goes on the blockchain. The banks can see it. They can see that you supplied Dangote Cement. They can see you've got the advanced payment guarantee. They're then prepared to lend against it. And because it's all on the blockchain, the other banks know that that's being lent against, so they don't lend against it again. So that's an example of turning a dead asset into a live asset. Let me give you another example. So we were talking about agricultural land, but you also have the crops. So right now it's very difficult for farmers to get financing, either even when they have the crop and they don't necessarily want to sell it, or when the crop is in the field. So then again, what are some of the innovations we can have in financial financial systems so that once you bring the crop off the field, the farmer isn't forced to sell it at a low price? Because of course, when the farmer harvests, for example, sorghum prices are at their lowest point. So the farmer could take that dead asset, which is his or her sorghum, and then borrow against the sorghum and pay off what they need to in terms of school fees and inputs for the next season. And then they can sell it at a higher price. So they've turned, if we have that system, it's turned a dead asset into a live asset. But probably, just if we had to roughly guess, probably 80 to 90% of dead assets are real estate. But there are these other classes of dead assets that we also need to bring to life with financial innovation, particularly the blockchain technology.
Andrew Nevin, thank you so much for having this conversation via telephone. This wasn't what we planned, but we understand how we're trying to be very tenacious with Lagos' nasty vehicular issues, in particular when we have some accidents as we have this morning along this corridor in the city. Thank you so much, Andrew, our partner and chief economist at PwC Nigeria, and we appreciate all the time you spend in traffic and getting all the way down back to your office. Thank you so much. Have a great day.